Welcome back to La Podcast to Philip. This time we're taking a deep dive into a story where, well, politics and tech kind of collide. You might even say they crash in a way that'll leave you thinking, wait, is this real life? We're talking Google Maps, Donald Trump's second term, and a new label for the U.S. sensitive country.
Yeah, you really got to buckle up for this one.
If you're enjoying these deep dives, hit that subscribe button on our YouTube channel and give this video a like. Helps more folks find the show.
Absolutely. Spread the word.
All right, so picture this. It's January 2025. Trump's just started his second term as president.
Second term. Can you believe it?
And one of his first moves, he signs an executive order changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico.
Ew.
The Gulf of America.
No way. Seriously.
Yep. Seems like a small thing, right?
You'd think so, but wow.
But it triggered this whole chain reaction, like a butterfly effect, you know?
Oh, definitely. This seemingly tiny change really pulls back the curtain on the power dynamics between governments and these huge tech companies. Google, after pushing back a bit at first, they caved. Updated Google Maps to show that new name.
But there's a twist.
Always a twist.
They only changed it for users inside the U.S.
Interesting.
And this is where it gets really wild. To make this change happen, Google had to do something unusual. They reclassified the U.S. as a, get this, sensitive country.
Sensitive country, that's usually reserved for places with, those governments that really control information, lots of border disputes, that kind of thing. Think China, Russia, Saudi Arabia. Pretty ironic, right? Considering how the U.S. often talks about itself compared to those countries.
It's like America's staring into a mirror, but doesn't like what it sees. What really gets me is how a name change created all these technical issues for Google. They had to figure out how to show different names for the same Gulf, depending on where you are in the world.
Oh, yeah. Talk about a headache. From what I hear, internally, Google bumped this up to P0 priority. That's their highest level, like drop everything, fix this now kind of thing.
Wow.
And even with all that, they ended up with this kind of messy solution. People in Mexico, they still see Gulf of Mexico, but everyone else, they see both names on their maps.
So imagine you're, I don't know, a tourist in France planning a trip to this Gulf, and you see two different names on your map.
Talk about confusing.
It makes you wonder.
Right.
How reliable is the information we get online these days? Especially in this whole digital age, can we really trust what we see?
It's a great question. This whole thing really throws a wrench in our assumptions about online info, especially when it comes to maps and locations. They can be swayed by, well, politics in ways we might not even realize.
You know what's really interesting here? This situation actually reveals even more about how Google labels countries, that sensitive country tag. It's not always about border stuff or strict governments.
Oh, really? There's more to it than that. Exactly. They also use it for countries that, how do I put this? They have unique geometry or unique labeling problems, I guess you could say.
Unique geometry? That sounds kind of vague.
It is a bit, yeah. Basically, it's not always about politics. Sometimes it's about, like, the technical challenges of showing a place accurately on a map.
Okay, I think I'm following. But how does renaming the Gulf of Mexico create a unique geometry problem? It's just a name change.
Well, think about it. You've got the same Gulf, but now with different names depending on who's looking at the map. Google has to make sure people in Mexico see one name, people in the U.S. see another, and everyone else might see both.
Ah, so it's about keeping all those versions straight.
Exactly. It's a logistical nightmare, way more complex than what Google usually deals with.
So even a simple name change can have these crazy ripple effects in tech. Who knew?
It's a great example of how a political decision can create all these unintended consequences. And it shows the tightrope that companies like Google have to walk. They want to give people accurate information, but they also have to deal with, well, political pressure.
It's like they're stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Right. And that brings up a bigger question. What does all this tell us about tech and politics in general? How are they influencing each other?
Yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? It feels like those two worlds are getting closer and closer all the time.
Absolutely. We tend to think of technology as neutral, right? But this whole Gulf of America thing shows that even something as simple as a map can be twisted by politics.
Which is a little scary when you think about it. I mean, what happens when more and more of our lives depend on these online platforms?
That's the million-dollar question. How do we make sure tech serves everyone, not just the people in power?
It really does feel like to navigate this digital world, you need like a whole new set of skills. It's not just knowing how to use the tech anymore, but how to understand how all these hidden forces are shaping it.
Yeah, definitely. This Gulf of America situation is a perfect example of that. We think maps are neutral, objective, right?
Hmm.
But this shows how even they can be influenced by, well, political agendas. It can really change how we see the world.
And it makes you wonder about the future. What happens when our lives are basically running on these platforms? How do we make sure they're serving everyone, not just the powerful?
Those are the questions we need to be asking, that's for sure. I don't have all the answers, but one thing is clear. We need
Yeah.
to be having these discussions. We can't let things slide. We got to shine a light on these issues, demand more transparency from these tech giants. They have so much power over our lives.
It's definitely a wake-up call. We can't just assume everything we see online is true or unbiased. Got to be more careful, more critical, more involved in shaping this whole digital world.
Absolutely. I think this deep dive has been a good first step. We really unpacked a complex issue, looked at it from different angles, and hopefully gave our listeners something to think about.
Definitely. So as we wrap up here, what's the one thing you hope people take away from this?
Don't be afraid to question what you see online. Look deeper. Consider other points of view. And don't fall for easy answers to complicated problems. This whole digital age, it demands that we think critically, and we all got to step up to that challenge.
Well said. Great way to end it. Thanks for joining me for this deep dive. It's been eye-opening for sure.
My pleasure. Always interesting to see where technology and society collide.
Definitely. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. We'll be back next time with another deep dive into the stories that are shaping our world.